Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy at Data.World, joined by Juan.
Hey, Tim, I'm Juan Cicada, Principal Scientist at Data.World. And as always, it is great to take a break in your day and let's go have a great chat about data and AI today. And I am just super incredibly excited to have the one and only Ethan Mollick, who is the associate professor at Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. If you have not been following Ethan, I think you have literally not only lived underneath a rock, you have been missing out on just incredible amount of information and wisdom about how you should be using AI for your day-to-day life organization and how it's transforming our world. And Ethan, it's just amazing everything that you have been doing for, I think, honestly, for like humanity based on all the research you've been doing, because you're really pushing us to be better at this. Ethan, it is such an honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, hey, as always, let's kick it off. Honest, no BS. We are pre-recording this episode, so we're not having cocktails right now. But we always talk about what are we drinking right now, or what is your favorite drink, a cocktail or mocktail? Ethan.
Well, so people don't realize it because I talk fast, but I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I have to do a shout out to the classic drink of southeastern Wisconsin, which is a brandy old fashioned with sweet, which is brandy with squirt soda in it as the sweetener. I cannot vouch for it, but that is you got to carry a little bit of your history with you.
Oh
That is
my.
cool.
I had no idea about that, and that's the next cocktail I'm going to go do.
I do not recommend it, but yes, that's
No,
fine.
that's fine. We still can do it. I'm like, having a cocktail which I don't like. Well, that's the honest no BS right there. Tim, how about you? What are you drinking right now?
My favorite cocktail of the moment happens to be just a classic daiquiri. I've been making those every once in a while. I got a bunch of limes I'm trying to work through, but today, because it's early in the morning, I'm actually drinking a mocktail, one of these recessed Cosmos over here, which are not bad. Actually, I've been trying to drink more mocktails,
Nah, well, I'm just still having coffee, but I am still excited about testing all my cocktails with Aperol. The Aperol with whiskey, with vodka, gin, and then with coffee. That's the one I'm kind of really.
You've got too much Aperol,
All right. Well, the quick warm up question: What's your favorite use of AI today?
I mean, there's 1,000 things I put it to on a regular basis, right? I mean, I post these blog posts that are pretty well read, and the only thing that makes me sane, because I write everything myself, right? Like it's not like I have a team, and I often finish them like 2 a.m. when I'm getting really tired. The backup plan, the thing that makes them easy to send out, is I don't have the AI write them, but I do have them read them afterwards and give me feedback about, am I going to do anything that upsets anyone? Is there anything that would be unclear? So that kind of higher level thinking and simulation of people, I find incredibly useful.
For me, it's challenging me. So I'm like thinking about a strategy, an idea, or whatever. And I'm like, send it to the LLM, and I'm like, challenge me. Like, what did I miss? How can I make this better? What are the things I'm not thinking about? So I'm definitely that's for me like super huge, not just productivity, but also just makes me better too. Tim, what's yours?
I'm on a very similar page. I used to be using LLMs and things like that a lot more for like, hey, write me a press release and things like that. But what I find myself doing a lot more now is using it as a debate partner, right? Like, hey, what are the ways that this could go wrong? What are all the ways that this could be maximized? And sometimes it's a little too flattering, right? It's like, oh no, this is all great. It's like, no, like try again. Like actually try to rip this to shreds, right? And I think that's been awesome.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's just kick it off. So, honest, no BS, Ethan. How do we have agency over how AI is used?
I mean, I think people tend to view AI as something being done to them, when in reality it is it's a software process, right? Like whatever it might become. Right now, that's what it is, and we decide what it's used for. The labs don't know what it's used for. They don't actually think about any of the issues about data integrity or any other concern. They think about building software that mostly coding is what they care about. And there's no consulting company that knows the answer. So we have to figure this out for ourselves. And that gives us agency, because figuring out for ourselves means deciding what goals we want to have. How do we execute those goals? What's ethical, what's not ethical to do? How do we help our customers, our clients, the world thrive? I mean, that's agency.
So what? Okay, so I want to separate because we use the word "we" here. What is "we" from a personal standpoint, and what are those agencies that we're seeing people do it from a personal standpoint, and also from organizations and different types of enterprises? What are you seeing right there?
So at the personal level, part of this is deciding how you use this to help you thrive rather than to undermine you, right? So we were just talking about things of like debate partner, getting you to think better. There are times where you might want to outsource thinking. There's parts where you don't want to. Having the wisdom to know what the decision is a big deal, right? Like, for example, in learning, it's really easy for the AI to summarize vast amounts of knowledge very quickly. There are times where that's incredibly valuable. But there are also times, and as data people, where you want to get into the data, and even if you're going to be wrong for a while and hit loose ends, to understand what something means often requires going through a process of thinking about it. So you have agency over whether I have the AI summarize everything, and then I'm never going to get my hands on the data, versus let me get my hands on the data first, and then work with the AI to summarize it. There are times either of those things work, right? At the personal level, we decide what agency we have. At the organizational level, it's even more important because AI can be a replacement for people. It can help people do jobs better. It can help to make jobs more tedious. It can turn work into a panopticon. It can give us all a tutor and mentor to help us thrive. These are not automatic choices. We get to decide how AI is used.
On the organizational side, I think sometimes people talk about, both sort of the producer side of AI and then a little bit more the consumption side of AI, right? And the consumption side of AI being kind of like, organizations that are starting to bring AI applications and use cases into their four walls and getting, tools in the hands of their employees and things like that, maybe incorporating it into some customer experiences. Obviously, there's some choice in what use cases you pursue and what principles you follow and, things like that on that side. And then there's more like the producer side, right? When people kind of, sometimes there's real threats here. Sometimes it's a little more waxing philosophical about like, well, OpenAI and these different organizations that are building AI and kind of innovating the future, right? Where do you see the power of agency, to really design the future of AI? Is it kind of the creators of AI? How much power do the consumers, the organizational consumers, have around AI?
I think it was the point I was trying to make was that the consumers have huge amounts because they're also producing it. It's a general purpose technology. That you're getting electricity to your house thanks to the AI providers, but you've got to figure out how to channel that, right? The Industrial Revolution didn't happen because of steam power. It happened, you needed steam power, but it happened because skilled artisans in factories were doing the work that figured out how to adapt power to be the power loom inside the weaving factory and to pack gunpowder in the gunpowder factory and to handle one very specific movement needed to get rivets in place. Like that's the piece we have control over. And we get to decide, do people get hired? Do they get fired? Where is it ethical to use this or not? Like those choices are not being made by the labs.
Okay, so what are the different approaches to kind of figure out this agency? So because I'm thinking like I'm just gonna kind of think about cool stuff and like throw shit at the wall, see what sticks. Am I actually going to look at like, okay, here's this current task, here's this thing I'm doing today, how do I figure out how to go make that better, different, and so forth? Because I said, is there a better ideal way to go doing this, or right now we're like just try everything?
It starts with try everything. I was just yesterday in a meeting with CEOs from top companies, and what universally, like basically nobody had ever spent 10 hours with AI systems. Like you need to know enough to know what this does. You also can't delegate it to purely an IT function, right? It has to be something people experiment with. Experimentation turns into disciplined experimentation, which turns into R&D, which turns into products. But you've got to start down that path somewhere. No offense to my good friends who are doing SaaS solutions and stuff, but like we do need to be thinking about at the individual firm level. There's a lot of expertise that is embedded in the firm that needs to be turned into AI solutions there as well.
I really like this. This disciplined experiments, right? That goes into R&D, innovation, and then into product. I think that's something that everybody should be trying to go do. I'm curious. You talk to so many people. Where is the state right now? Like, if people wanted to benchmark themselves right now, it's like, yeah, how many people are actually in that level of experimental discipline experiment, actually doing more things from enterprises?
I think lots of organizations are in what I'd call, so sort of think about phase 0 is nobody's using AI for anything. Or there's a random experimentation. Phase 1 is probably Copilot phase, right? Everybody got Microsoft Copilot or is using an AI vendor in some way that is allowing employees to use it, and they're probably also building an internal talk to our documents, customer service, or proposal-based solution. So narrow use cases, very supported, having all of the edges sanded off, and making it and centrally controlled. The next phase, and lots of organizations are in a big boom in spending is coming. What I'm seeing now is the first organization ends what I call the second phase, which is realizing that actually to get real value out of this, we have to figure out what the AI knows about our industry or not. Is it a good advisor? What does it work well? Like when we let it be more constrained, let the AI make decisions and start doing stuff. What does that capabilities that give us to do that we couldn't do before? So rather than building highly constrained systems designed to kind of do things that conventional systems could do, but a little bit better, it's now about what are the capabilities that intelligence brings to the table. And then I think we're just seeing experimentation with the third phase, which will be agent based.
And right now, like, how would you see the world, basically enterprises, like it, who's in phase, how many people are in phase 0, how many people are in phase 1, who's actually doing phase 3 all the way there?
I think 80 to 90% of companies are in phase 0, and I think 9% are in phase they are in phase 1 maybe, and I think that there's just a handful that I've talked to that are beyond that, but it's happening more quickly than I would have thought given it's a new technology.
So the other thing that comes to mind, and having a lot of these conversations, is we're talking, I personally say that this is a web moment, right? Think about the early 90s of how the web come in and it transformed our lives, and which we now take for granted everywhere. But we did have a big bubble, which is the .com bubble and stuff. What's your perceptions right now about people talking about this bubble, the hype, and is it going to keep going and so forth?
I think it's a kind of a not useful conversation. I mean, first of all, the issue of the bubbles imply, I mean, so there is hype in any new technology, right? And there's hype in the web, whatever. But in the web, there was a broad-based financial bubble. There's no financial bubble in AI because you can't spend the money on it. Like it's not there. You can't invest in, aside from NVIDIA and a handful of other companies, there's not 10,000 AI companies you can invest in that's driving up an asset bubble. Also, look, you talk to the AI labs and they genuinely believe that AGI is possible, that they can get there in the next 5 years. Like, there's a technological bet that we didn't have for the web. The web was a thing that was going to transform everything. And I think people overestimated how quickly it would come, but underestimated its impact. Like nobody was wrong about that, right? Like look at the companies who were made fun of most in the web era. It was Webvan, which did delivery of groceries and food. It was pets.com, right? Which these were not companies that were dumb ideas. They actually turned into $100 billion industries over, it just took it 10 years later. So I think one part of this is there a hype bubble? Sure, but on what aspects, right? I think people are hyped about some stuff, but I think they're way underhyping other values of AI. And it's a broad-based technology. Adoption takes a long time.
Do you think vendors are a big part of what are going to be driving adoption around AI, or do you think they're kind of one smaller part of the equation of how this is playing out?
So here's my again, always being cautious about this stuff, but my view is vendors are not being imaginative enough. They're fighting defensive moves where they're like, let's slap an agent on this to make it easier. And what I'm seeing is they're stuck in that sort of phase 1 view. Like people are not getting how much these systems can do, right? They are very capable. I mean, I've already been demoing AI agents just that I built on my own that do things like they'll do, they'll act as simulated customers and go to websites. They'll watch video feeds of a construction site and note, and give individual people suggestions about how to improve their work and point out issues and build punch lists. They offer really good advice. I mean, we're just not taking advantage of the depth here. And I find most vendors are slapping a chatbot on top of what they do. That often is like, hey, help me with documentation, help me build something. Which, by the way, the AI is not that great at, right? Like it doesn't like to follow instructions that well in that kind of way. It wants to be in dialogue. It doesn't, it hallucinates details. When you stop it from hallucinating, you often have to kind of electroshock out the other stuff that makes it interesting. So I feel like people aren't willing to trust software. That's an IT thing, right? But look, you've got to deal with the fact that this doesn't work like software. It works more like a person than software. And we're in a world now where software sometimes insults you, and software sometimes, tries to start a cult or threatens your family, and sometimes, has better advice than you do. It's a different world.
I really like the way that you're unpacking this here, and I do agree that I think I agree with your point that vendors are not being imaginative enough, and I think there's a fear. There's a very strong fear that it can't be controlled. What if it makes a mistake? What if it and what I hear you saying a little bit is we need to be thinking a lot more about the use cases where those mistakes are a feature, where that exploratory nature of it is a feature. And, do you have advice on like how to embrace that more imaginatively? Like, do we need to kind of break a lot of our existing conceptions around how we think software should operate and really allow this new paradigm to kind of bloom?
I mean, yes. I mean, I think we need to do R&D, which people aren't used to doing. They do D, right? They're not doing R&D. Like, one of the things that worries me most is that large companies in the United States, and I think around the world, there used to be a role where it was about reinvention and trying to figure out new ways to organize and do work. That has largely been outsourced to either consultants or to vendors, right? So you go to Salesforce, and Salesforce puts on you a structure for how to think about work and sales funnels. Workday puts a structure on you for doing these things. So they've stopped doing the imagination themselves, right? What could work be? I don't know. It's whatever it was and whatever the vendors have said it is. So I think that at the vendor level, part of this is being a little more daring about offering things that reimagine stuff. You have the data, you have the connection, you have the pathway to the customer. How do you help them, do something radical with this? I don't think chatbots that let you, answer questions about your vendor program or help you set up your very bad UX, not you guys, but other people, is a great like angle to follow as the right pathway forward.
So I'm with you, and I struggle when talking to organizations and pushing them to be more imaginative, and then they're all just risk averse. Everybody is being so risk averse around this stuff, right? I mean, I just see the handful, that 1% who are going to be who are those forward thinking strategic folks who want to go do something daring, and they know that. I always quote, like, we're building the future together on this stuff, but the majority are not there, and they don't want to go take those leaps. So what is it? I mean, this is what frustrates me. Is it just a lack of leadership of people that have that don't have bigger visions? We just need to. I don't know. What do we do?
I'm going to loop it back to. I guarantee you that the root cause of a lot of this, not the only cause, but a root cause, is that they haven't spent 10 hours with an AI system. I mean, it's just that easy in a lot of cases. They haven't spent 10 hours with an AI system. They have no idea what these systems can actually accomplish. And as a result, they've put it to the IT group. The IT group, look, even just the most basic way IT thinks about software acquisition, right? They want low latency, low cost per transaction. They're used to huge amounts of interactions. How do I lower latency and cost? That's a terrible idea for many AI applications, because the scaling law tells us that the smarter your AI model is, the bigger your AI model is, which also the slower, the more expensive it is. Like, you want to bring PhD level intelligence to a problem, you can't do low latency and low cost. But it could be 100% worth it because you're getting a person replacement or a supplement, and not an answer served to you. So what it comes down to, the attitude change starts with people having to use these systems and having their, I talk about in the book, 3 sleepless nights of just like worrying about what this means. If they haven't had that, they're not there.
Man, I tell you, like we're doing all these chatbots, right? And then their complaint is it's too slow. We need to speed it up. I'm like, for God's sake, like, we're trying to go do something a little bit more imaginative around this stuff. And your first thing you're complaining about is that it's slow. And I'm like, I think just the frustration that we want people to think out of the box around this stuff. So I'm from an executive point of view, like, I mean, looking at executives, C-suites within organizations. You're saying that the majority of them haven't even spent 10 hours with these AI systems?
I mean, I tell them literally the first piece of advice in my book is use it for everything, and you'll find out what's good or bad at. Like, it's fine. It's not going to be great at everything, but like, use it for everything. They should be asking for advice, feeding at their emails and talking to it. Help me come up with ideas for this. Summarize this transcript. What should I say? Let me talk through a strategic issue I have in voice mode. Here's my latest, 10K. What do you think of it? Everything. And then you learn what's good or bad for. And people's unwillingness to experiment at the executive level is holding people back.
What are you concerned about?
There's lots of things. This is a general purpose technology. There's lots of good and bad going on, right? So I'm concerned about this being used as a panopticon or system of control in organizations. Every web camera is an intelligent, interactive, boss. What does that mean? Right? I can watch what everybody does and do things. I'm concerned about, deep fakes and at the sort of level, not so much politics, so that's a concern, but, what's happening inside schools and, using it as bullying techniques. Like, there's lots of stuff to worry about. I think there's legitimate worries about whether or not AI enables bad actors to do worse things. I think security is in huge trouble right now, IT security, and they haven't even thought to catch up to it, because it's not a system problem. It's that I can now create beautiful spear phishing emails en masse. I can emulate anyone's voice or face really easily. I could have faked myself for most of the Zoom call, and it would have just seemed like I was pausing a little bit longer. Like, this is not hard stuff to do. And I feel like people are not ready for the negative side.
So this, I mean, what you just said is what I hear a lot of people beat as a concern. And one of the reasons why they're like, then there's so much pause and they're like, oh, I don't want to go touch this. So how do we, what is your recommendation for people to go balance it? So one, yes, it's like, go test and go plays around this for 10 hours, you're saying, but then how do they, what's your advice for folks who are like, and there's all these bad issues, but we need to go address them too.
And to extend that, some people, are really hitting the talking point of like, well, we need regulation. Like the regulation needs to come in, and they're kind of like waiting for that guidance to come in. I'm curious on your take on that as well.
I mean, so sure, it's everything, right? We're not going to get, but if you're waiting for effective regulation, it seems unlikely we're going to get it. And if it is, it's going to be good in some ways and bad in other ways. Like, you can't just abrogate responsibility. We started with the idea of agency. Like, to me, the worst thing I hear is then people are like, well, but I have no agency. Yes, you do. If your organization is a model of using AI to help humans thrive and help your customers thrive and being honest and open about what you're doing, you've made the world a better place, right? So you do have agency over this stuff. And the next move is not that hard, right? Like, AI is good at some stuff, bad at other stuff. We call it the jagged frontier of AI, right? And amateurs have a lot of trouble telling what's good or bad. But if you're an expert in your field, you can instantly tell if the AI is going off the rails, heading in the right direction, BSing you, because you've dealt with humans doing this before. So you're like, oh, actually, it understands this stuff, like talking about data stuff. It understands these issues of data integrity, but it worries way too much about ethics compared to how much of a concern it is in the real world. And it worries way much less about these 4 issues that come up all the time. Right. And so you adjust your prompts and see if you can make it work better with that. Like, it's about you working with the system. And as a boss, then it's about you giving other people with expertise a chance to experiment with this and then incentivizing them to work with you to innovate. Right. It's about building the entire organization to innovate, because they won't show you if they think they're going to get fired for using AI, or if they're worried you're going to steal their ideas, or if you're worried they're going to fire them and their friends because you're more efficient now, or you'll disrespect them. It's a decision at the organizational level, not the individual level.
Oh man. Okay. So one of the things that we do, this is not a salesy thing about Data World. I'm going to talk about Data World for a second here. Is we've actually been putting we have this role, the VP of AI operations, which we've gone. Brandon is our VP of AI operations. He's gone through every single business unit, trying to understand people's problems and what they're trying to go do, and figure out how they can use AI for all these particular issues. And it's been really fascinating to go see how we can actually go find these particular problems that are just like the annoyances, and try to eliminate those stuff and make people much more productive around it. So that's that role that we have about VP of AI operations, as a way of getting people excited about this, understanding what the problems are. What are your thoughts about something like that? Like, are there new types of roles within organizations that we should be kind of saying, hey, you know what, I'm not going to just delegate it to IT. I'm actually going to, in a way, delegate it to some role or a function that's actually thinking about this in a more imaginative way. Is that something that you think is actually viable?
Yes, HR is R&D now. Like, your people have to be doing this. If you can't trust your people and they don't trust you, you're in trouble. The fundamental about R&D is that it happens much less centrally than people think. It's almost all breakthrough innovation. It's not almost all, but quite a few come from end users who are frustrated, right? And they figure out a way to solve problems, and because with the material at hand, because they have to solve it. R&D is cheap in your area of expertise because it's easy for you to experiment. You can do things a little differently every time. You're doing the job every day. So like, I'll try doing a retrieval this way. I'll try doing it this way. I'll try that. And like, it's a cheap thing to do. If I have to go to a central lab to make that decision, they have to build an entire system to emulate what I do every day. And they're not experts in my topic. It's very expensive, very hard to do. Your R&D is already happening at the edges of your organization. The factor is which companies will figure that out or not.
Mm-hmm. So just a moment ago, you talked about some of the concerns, right? And we approach that kind of broadly. Maybe let's flip that a little bit. The exciting part of AI. Like what are you seeing that is the expected good stuff? What are you seeing that is unexpected, that maybe surprised you a little bit? And what are you kind of seeing around the corner?
I mean, I think I am surprised at how much insight these systems have. Just genuine insight. I can give it all my academic papers and ask it to come up with through lines and run through them, and it gets it. I can give it complex statistical patterns, and it figures out like papers, and it figures out what the flaws are, like PhD level stuff, right? And that's where we're at with like Claude and GPT-4o preview, and like people are not giving these things enough credit for what they can do.
So, and then talking about from a research perspective, academic, like I'm actually right now at the International Semantic Web Conference, the Knowledge Graph Conference, and I mean, obviously, knowledge graphs and LLMs is like the huge topic here. What should academics, the kind of the scientific community, really be focusing on? Like, what are the open scientific issues that we should be focusing on?
So, I think that people have to rethink how they're thinking about retrieving knowledge. I think that, and I know we had other discussions offline about this, that a pure kind of RAG-based approach that a lot of organizations take is about not trusting the AI enough. And if you conceptualize the AI like a person, and you think about the knowledge a person needs to have to solve a problem, that starts to become much more powerful. I tend to tell people, imagine you're sliding note cards under a door to an intern, and they're given an instruction on top of with a note card with instructions, and then a bunch of other note cards, and it says use these note cards to solve the problem. They're just going to read a bunch of random stuff and try and BS you a solution to it, right? And it's no wonder that Anthropic has that great paper that shows that you can improve RAG results by literally just telling the AI where each document came from, so it has some context. I feel like the danger I have is the people who know knowledge-based systems and know retrieval, who know knowledge graphs, are in a world where they have had to make dumb systems smart by giving it the right information at the right time. They're not used to making smart systems smarter by giving it the kind of information that it would need. And that's what worries me. Instead they're making smart systems dumb, right? Like you can tell how many times do I have to see pipelines where everything leads up to the LLM, and then there's no test maybe aside from accuracy, but with the LLM outputs. LLMs are hyper persuasive. They're more persuasive than the average person in studies. You tell it to tell, that this document's important. It's going to come with a story about why the document's important to the end user. Like, people are not thinking enough about the psychology of these things. And that's what makes me nervous, right? We can't just treat it as a pure technical end-to-end problem. And too many organizations are. And it isn't just like, it isn't just getting like, how do we get our chunking right? And how do we do this stuff right? And how do we find the associated, like, it is about how do we deal with this sort of weird pseudo-human that's not a person at all, it's a machine in a box that thinks it's a person, and how do we get that to do better work for us?
So this is fascinating how you bring this up, because we continue to look at LLMs from a technical perspective, right? I mean, yeah, RAG is a technical thing, because we didn't have that stuff, and we do the chunking, and people focus on like all the metrics on how to go do this are more quantitative about technical aspects. But we really need to start thinking about the social, psychological aspects as think about this LLM not as a piece of technology, but as a social agent, I'm almost as a person. What would it look like? I mean, one of the things that I kind of also, when people talk about accuracy, it's like, well, that's not accurate enough. I'm like, wait, you're asking that question today to some analyst, and they're giving you an answer. How do you know that they actually interpreted that answer correctly, actually gave you the result? Like, that actually happens today with your humans, with your colleagues around there, right? So in a way, like, it kind of, we have to have that same model, I think, and thinking about it that way and evaluate that stuff too.
Yeah, and not just that. It's also about, what's the best available human standard? Like, what is, is it better or worse than the best human you can have to do the work? How do we build control systems? We build control systems around humans that are flawed. Like, what's the control system around AI systems? Like, when do you trust it? When do you not trust it? What kind of decision making? Is it flagging stuff to a human? Is it part of a voting council? Are you using LLMs as a judge to judge other? Like, there's so much opportunity here. And I just see people, like, especially in the IT world, especially in the data world, their desperate desire is to have the AI work like fuzzy search of some sort, or as a summarizer. And it doesn't want to be a summarizer or fuzzy search. It wants to give you opinions. It wants to be persuasive. It wants to talk to you with wants and quotes for all these things. I'm anthropomorphizing. Like, take advantage of those aspects of it. It wants to analyze. It wants to understand. It wants to help. Like, as soon as you start caging it too much of like, this is exactly what you must do, it's bad at that. Like, and if you're making it do those things, you're in a world of hallucination and pain.
Yeah. There's a huge opportunity here to be doing these things more, because I agree, like, we're kind of trying to mute those characteristics right now, and just to go back to what you said about, like, we're making smart systems dumb, right? That really kind of got me thinking. I know Juan, probably you as well, around, right now there's sort of this pattern that we've fallen into, I think, around these RAG architectures, which it's a pretty low fidelity information exchange. And I'm curious, Ethan, do you see different patterns as ones that are starting to emerge, or ones that you've got your eye on, or different architectures where maybe knowledge is being embedded more with LLMs? Do we just need to embrace training and fine tuning more, and we're
I
a
don't
little
know. I
over
mean,
indexing on
the,
RAG? I don't know.
the fine tuning stuff is, I mean, look, I am 100% a context window person. Like, I think that as the kind of, like, I would be betting on future, right? So to me, the first RAG system I tell people to use is Control C and Control V. Like, just figure, like, if you can figure out a document that would help give context, you'll understand where it's getting right or wrong. Like, it has to start with the users in the same kind of way. They have the expertise. They know what they're trying to accomplish. So to me, part of this is we're trying to solve this problem because we know, like, and part of this comes from a tradition, which is what was AI prior to 2022? Like, it was large scale labeled data that we could use to do retrieval on, but also be able to train our own models. It wasn't this thing that we have, this weird quasi-human, talking machines, kind of problem. Like, it's a very different issue. And so what you really want to do is, what do I want to accomplish? And the answer isn't, I want to retrieve documents for my human. It's I want to accomplish, I want to be smart on what's happening in this industry. I want my salespeople to go into a meeting prepped up and ready to go. I want them to, and even one step further, I want to win this sale. And the way you win sales is personalized, detailed information for people. Great. How do we redesign that process, right? Like, it's not about providing a better sales briefing to your salesperson. Is it about having a coach in the room that's basically helping out with this stuff? Is there an AI assigned to each person, thinking about what they're doing and keeping up to date on it, and flagging you when there's something interesting touch point coming along? It's just such a failure of imagination up and down the line.
Well, it kind of, to use a bit of an analogy, it reminds me a little bit of like the different ways that a manager might interact with an employee, right? Like, if you have a very low level, low capability intern, let's say, right, you're going to treat them with extreme boundaries. You're going to say, never leave the confines of these rules and things like that. But when you're really working with a highly intelligent peer, or better yet, an expert who you're really tapping for, deep expertise, you're going to give them much more open-ended guidance, really more like intense. Here are my goals. Here's what I want to accomplish,
Yes,
not
yes.
like all these constraints,
But
right?
but also advice. Like, it's about advising the AI. Here's some steps that you might want to go through. Watch how it does right or wrong. Like, the more you manage people, the better you are at managing AI.
So I think it's one of the things that we're seeing. We complain about these quote unquote issues that the LM has when they're actually the features, and we're not embracing those features as kind of like that's what we should be focusing on, and we're kind of like, as you said, making the smart systems dumber. And so we really need to think about, like, stop thinking about that as a bug. It's actually, that's the way it was done as a feature. So go embrace that. But for organizations, like, I love that you're saying that the first RAG system would be Control C to Control V. You want to be able to pass to these things a lot of the knowledge and the context of an organization. So which begs the question is, like, how should organizations then be managing, preparing their knowledge and the context of their stuff, which the LLM doesn't know, that you want to give it to them? What are your recommendations for the best way of managing that, such that we can actually use the LLMs to thrive, to help us be more creative for new strategies you want to come up with?
I think we need to think about information in new ways, right? Like, that data is useful, but everyone's used to, like, it's amazing how many executives I talk to is like, we have data. Like, okay, so what is that? Is that, you have 5,000 versions of the same proposal that you've sent out to different people? Is that, and like, whether you won or lost, is that data? Do you have you hired the world's best writers to write the initial drafts for you, so that that's something that you are then using as a few shot method? Like, what does it mean to have data? And I think that people got badly trained in the first AI machine learning era, which was that if you have lots of data, the AI will find the pattern in it. That's not actually how it works for LLMs. LLMs are much better off, trying to give, like, you're much better off not fine tuning a model under most circumstances. Again, that's controversial, but, like, there are cases where you want to use it, but a lot of people just apply to fine tuning. New paper just came out today, by the way, showing fine tuned medical models outperformed by non-fine tuned medical models that are non-fine tuned general purpose models. Using the better prompts, right? Like, people aren't spending enough time thinking about what data your system needs to know. It's about delivering the right set of information the right way. Where's your canonical data, rather than I have all of it? And I think that just is a big problem. People are thinking the wrong way about this stuff, and they're thinking about, and when they think about data quality, they mean labeled data quality. They don't mean actual quality. Is this well written or not? Does someone spend some time writing a really clear description of what this job does? Different kind of beast.
Yeah, I think it's difference between sort of this big data paradigm that we just came out of to good data, but more than just data. Like, what's the knowledge? What's the context? What's unique to unique to you and to your organization?
Yeah, I think for what I'm seeing right now is like there's now an incentive to really organize kind of that data and turn that into like real knowledge and meaning of that stuff, because that's what you want to go use and pass it on to these LLMs. Look, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I think we want to go. We have our lightning round questions, which I'm going to kick them off here. Number one, you mentioned phase one is a co-pilot phase. Is that an okay first phase, or should organizations be jumping to actually like a phase two more directly?
It can be a trap, right? I mean, co-pilots are not. They have all the edges sanded off so no one can hurt themselves, right? So they also can't cut anything. So they're kind of like they're kind of weak sauce for most people. They automate getting work done, but don't help with thinking or advice or anything else. So there's a chance people just turn into unseeing automatons and just push a button. So it can be a perfectly reasonable first step, but I'd love to see people think about it hard.
That's good advice. Second question: do you think that Gen AI is going to help people with data management, or is the connection to sort of data management a little overstated?
I mean, I think it helps. It helps you like a person would help you. It doesn't help you like a machine learning system would help you, and that's a hard differentiator for people. Like people ask me, like, can I throw in all of my financials and it'll tell me what's going to happen next? I said, well, it will do that like a human would. It's going to run a bunch of it's going to write a bunch of Python programs, and desperately look at the data and try and like tell you something interesting there. And you could say, well, can you go deeper? And it'll do that. Like, it solves problems in a way a human would solve it. So it will not solve your data management problems in a way of like a machine learning system that's going to figure out all these interesting relationships. But if 100 human analysts or 1 million human analysts would help you, it's extremely helpful. Like, if the AI did nothing else than take unstructured data and make it structured, which it's really good at doing, it would change data management forever.
Which comes to my next question here. How are you? It's kind of an open-ended one. How are you seeing this combination of knowledge graphs and LLMs? Right, we've seen all like this graph rag and stuff, and a lot of the work that we've been doing. Like, how important is this combination? Or what's
and knowledge graphs? And I think that we have not learned how to teach AI well. I think knowledge graphs help, like, in both academic papers and conceptually, have a lot of promise. But I think we're still trying to figure all of this out. And I know you guys have some solutions that look really interesting. I think part of it is also getting people to think less about accuracy being the only important thing, as much as giving LLMs access to information that's useful, timely, and will help it, do its right thing. Because I think trying to eliminate all hallucinations, and you guys have done a good job on from what I've seen on that set of stuff. That's useful for some narrow areas, but it'd be but you're still not going to be able to eliminate it entirely. And there's still 1,000 other weaknesses people don't think about. They fixate on hallucinations or privacy, but they don't think enough about prompt injection. They don't think enough about refusals and all the other kinds of interesting areas there. So I think this is a beginning of how to enhance LLM work.
Very well stated. All right, last question, lightning round. Do you think that the majority of organizations will get to phase 2 and phase 3 in the next, let's say, 3 years?
I think there might be drag kicking and screaming there. I'm surprised at how fast giants have danced. I'm surprised how fast JP Morgan's adopted. I'm surprised at how fast that, other, I don't know who I have permission to mention, but lots of organizations are moving more fast than quickly, I think. But I think the thing we haven't talked about enough is these models are improving rapidly. So in some cases, the model may catch up with the organization.
Yeah, so it's not just a regular kind of adoption curve, because the technology is evolving so fast that it's got very different characteristics, it feels like.
Wow. All right. We did our best taking notes, and this is actually Tim and I are always taking notes around the stuff. So no LLM or was used for this. So hey, Tim, take us away with takeaways.
Yeah, sure. So, Ethan, amazing session together. We started with the honest, no BS question. How do we have agency over how AI is used? And I think you really started off by really emphasizing that, hey, look, the power is in our hands to get dirty with this technology, to use it, actually get those 10 hours in, get those 3 sleepless nights in. leverage it, and whether it's at the personal level, right, using it, debating with it, not just using it for the simple use cases, but actually making it into a partner, and at the organizational level, getting it in the hands of employees and letting them experiment, right? That like we have the power to figure out how we're going to use this, and we shouldn't necessarily, this is jumping ahead a little bit, wait for regulation to come down on high. It's not gonna, it's not gonna come down and dictate exactly how we're going to use these things. We're going to figure it out. And you mentioned, who has the power, right? And how do we apply that power? You talked about kind of this process, like experiment. It starts with like experimentation, goes to disciplined experimentation, research and development. The research piece probably being one of the most underemphasized pieces. Innovation to product, not just directly to product, right? And I think we're really constraining what's possible with AI, just trying to jump straight to product when we need to let this, experimentation and research phase kind of play out. And you mentioned, these phases of where organizations are, from like phase 0, not really doing anything yet, to phase 1, this co-pilot phase 2, getting some real value with a less constrained system. And then third being this very like agent-based future, sort of multiple agents working together. And you mentioned that probably 80 to 90% of organizations are really at that phase 0. They're just getting acquainted with all of this. Maybe 9 or 10% are at this phase 1 phase, starting to bring in co-pilots and things. A very small amount are at phase 2 and phase 3, but that's changing fast. There are organizations that are at the forefront. You also mentioned that we really need to embrace the imaginative. We are not being imaginative enough about how these things can be used. We need to push the envelope there and not constrain things. Embrace the persuasiveness of AI, and don't just slap a chatbot on top of your customer service department. Low hanging fruit's always great. I'm a big fan, right? But like let's really push for bigger things. And you mentioned some concerns, right? Obviously, the panopticon, right? The deep fakes, the what's going on with schools, bad actors, regulations going the wrong way, right? Like there's bad things that can happen. But that's with any technology, right? So those are the things we have to navigate. So much more, but Juan, over to you. What are your big takeaways?
So quotes that I love: HR is the new R&D, right? Every single organization, everybody they need to understand what they're frustrated on. You can do R&D on yourself. Like you have the solution in your hands. Go start doing this. And guess what? R&D is cheap if it's your area of expertise. So that's what I'm going to do. What are you excited about? Like from a research perspective, is how these things were just returned really great insights. It's actually doing PhD level stuff. From a scientific perspective, we need to really think how to extract knowledge. In a way, we do. RAG exists because we're not just trusting that AI enough. So we need to rethink about this stuff. He's like, I love this analogy. Imagine you're sliding note cards underneath the door to an intern and have them go solve the problem. Like that's what we're doing right now. We are used to making dumb systems smarter, but that is very different from making smart systems smarter. And sometimes we end up making these smart systems dumb. That's a very great way of thinking about this. We are not thinking about the psychology behind the LLMs. We're just thinking about it from a technical perspective. It's accurate and so forth. And we do have these standards around humans. Like we have control systems around humans and stuff. Let's think about what would that look like around LLMs. We go back to the technical side. IT is always desperate to do like the fuzzy search and type of stuff and using LLMs for that, right? Like, no, that's not what they're best for. LLMs are there because they want to be creative. They want to go push. They want to be helpful. Like use that as a feature. You know what your first RAG system should be? Control C, Control V. That's a t-shirt quote right there. You have to think, what do you want to accomplish? Your goal is not to, I want to figure out what part of the document I need to go to. What you want to accomplish is I want to win that sale. And the way to go to win that sale is I want to have some personalized content. Like that's the way we should be thinking about this. The better you are at managing people, the better you are at managing the AI. And I think at the end of the day, we just really need to think about information in new ways, right? We have data. It's like data is the new oil. It's like, what does that even mean? And I think, do you have any special understanding of what you've created, unique knowledge about X and Y? Like, what is your canonical data instead of like all of it stuff? And so we really need to start rethinking organizations about that information. There's plenty more, but Ethan, how did we do? Anything we missed?
Sounds amazing. It sounds smarter than what I said. So thank you.
Well, as we always say, it's all you. So to wrap up here quickly, 3 questions. What's your advice about data, AI, or life? I know we went through a lot of stuff, but who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
So my advice is honestly use these systems. You'll get most of the way there. I think that there's a lot of people doing really interesting kind of AI hacking on the outside edge of stuff, and I think about like Simon Wilmson, who's doing really neat open source stuff on this around data journalism, is a really interesting person to think about having on. On the training side, Matthew Bean, who's been thinking a lot about training and AI, and then on my advice generally about thinking about what I follow, what information. I mean, for better or for worse, Twitter or X or whatever is still where most of the font of information is happening, though it's starting to spread out to other social networking platforms. I have a Substack, one useful thing that can be useful to follow. But it's conversations like this one. That's where you get all the information from.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, we are extremely thankful for your time. And as always, thanks to Data.World who continues letting us do this on year 5 now that we're on it. Ethan, again, generally, thank you. We really
Thanks a lot.
appreciate it.